Coming up on today's podcast, it's my anniversary, 16 years as a war correspondent. We're going to take a look back at some pretty funny pieces from years past.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, I'm Chuck Holton, and I just realized it's my 16-year anniversary as a war correspondent. 16 years ago today, I got the first phone call to come and comment on what was going on in the war. If you recall, back then, there was a bunch of U.S. troops who were captured in Iraq, and one of them was named Jessica Lynch. She was the first female POW that was rescued, and I got asked to come and comment on the rescue operation, which happened to be carried out by the 3rd Ranger Battalion, the unit that I had been in years before. And so began my career as a correspondent, as a journalist. It was kind of funny because at first they just had me come on as the talking head and comment on what was going on during the war. But then they called me in and they said, hey, we'd like you to come and make television out of some of the writing that you're doing. And I said, I don't know how to do that, and I don't have any training. And they said, well, it's easy. You just stand in front of the camera and say what we tell you to say. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And thus began a career as a war correspondent. But, as I look back, I can see that God prepared me through all of my previous experiences to do the job that I do today. I used to be a professional photographer when I was a senior in high school, shot football games on Friday and Saturday nights for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And thank you to Rick Dalton for taking me under his wing and teaching me how to do that. And then as I got into the military, of course, in the special operations background certainly helps if you're going to the kind of places that I spend my time in now. And my time as a stockbroker, I worked and did a lot of research and did a lot of digging into companies and their backgrounds and their philosophies and things like that. And that kind of research background really helped me in the journalisming that I do now. So I went back and tried to dig around and find some of my first pieces that I made for CBN. And I just want to show you a couple of those, and you'll get a good laugh out of them. I know I did.
Would you enjoy a relaxing camping trip to the mountains? Didn't think so. But if you're looking for an experience that will leave you breathless, this is it. 3 days, no tents, no sleeping bags, no idea what will happen next. I'm Chuck Holton. For the past 6 years, I've been using my experience as a U.S. Army Ranger to lead groups of teens on wilderness survival trips with a twist.
Good job, guys. Good job.
The purpose behind these trips is not to be comfortable or even have fun. The purpose here is to see what you're made of. It's 36 hours of almost nonstop activity, from a 100-foot rappel off the top of a 900-foot cliff to a 1-mile trek through a mountain where you have to swim to get out.
Beautiful. Good job. You can do it, Jesse. Good job, Jessica.
To an amazing race-style event that will keep you guessing at every turn. All against a backdrop of some of the country's most beautiful scenery. To top it all off, there's a spiritual component woven into each activity that will make you see your life in a whole new light. So how about it? Are you ready to get out of your comfort zone? You'll get to talk about it for the rest of your life.
So, see, I used to do these adventure race type things for the youth group at our church, and they got really popular. And so eventually I got CBN to let me make a little feature about them. And that's what you just looked at. And going back and looking at the quality there just kind of makes me cringe a little bit. But hey, it was 16 years ago. What do you expect? So from there, I got a chance to finally start going to the war zone after doing a couple of years of features. That is, where we kind of recreate people's experiences, learning a lot about movie making and that sort of thing. I got asked to go to the war zone. And, as I think back at some of the experiences that I had in Afghanistan and Iraq, it just boggles my mind. Some of the, like National Geographic type experiences that I got to have. One of them was an Afghan bachelor party. And I was out with the 7th Special Forces Group in a place called Shamkhani. I think this was 2008. And they came one night and said, hey, the guys that we pay to guard the base where we're at are having a bachelor party. Do you want to come?
What we're doing here now is our in-charge commander is getting engaged for his second wife. And before we get engaged, we usually celebrate parties like this. So this is one of those parties. It doesn't have any particular significance. It's just for fun and happiness.
And so if you're not watching the podcast today, I would highly recommend that you do so because it is definitely worth watching. Basically, it's a bunch of Afghan guys dancing around in a way that, you just have to see it. As I say here on the video, no booze, no women, no problem, because these guys are having a really good time without any of that. Although if you had to guess, you'd say that they were definitely imbibing in some kind of narcotic, because nobody can move like that without being inebriated, that's for sure. But it wasn't all fun and games in the war zone. One of the real defining moments in my career was a particular mission I did with a medevac unit from the 101st Airborne. And that was on that same trip to Afghanistan, where we went and went into, they call a point of injury pickup, where they go to the site where the battle took place. And in this case, we picked up the victims of a roadside bomb attack. There were some who were grievously wounded, and there were a couple who actually gave their lives. They call them heroes. And it really changed my outlook on Veterans Day forever.
Task Force Shadow is an aviation unit based at Bagram Airfield. Its presence is vital, given the increase in enemy activity over the last year. Abram DeMarco is acting commander.
These are some of the greatest people that I've ever worked with. They work 15 to 20 hours a day sometimes. You can always count on them. These are some of the best maintained aircraft that I've ever worked with.
The aviation company of the 101st Airborne here at Bagram Airfield is one of the busiest units in the country. They're constantly being called on every day to ferry troops and equipment all over the eastern part of Afghanistan. But there's one other part of their mission that's even more important, and it goes by the call sign, Dust Off. Several times a day, sirens signal the need for emergency medical evacuation. On call at all times, this small team of highly trained pilots and medical personnel is ready to respond. Dwayne Taylor is a medevac helicopter co-pilot.
Basically, we're flying emergency room. We have everything that a patient needs in the back to stay alive, even all the way down to shocking that person to restart their heart.
It isn't long before the call comes in. A roadside bomb has hit a convoy south of Kabul. There are 6 urgent casualties. The crews rush to their aircraft, and moments later, we're airborne. The tension rises when we receive word that troops on the ground are receiving rocket and machine gun fire. It's expected to be a hot landing zone.
It's constantly running through my mind. Every single time we go to a point of injury that we could possibly be shot at or be attacked at while we're sitting there on the ground.
We touch down hard in a cloud of dust. Even before it clears, the wounded start to hobble aboard. That's when we get the terrible news. 2 soldiers of the 101st Airborne have died of their wounds. Over the radio, they're referred to as heroes. Emotions are high, and I drop my camera to help one of the wounded buckle in. Then the soldiers returned with one more litter, one of those killed in action. That hero's name is Donnie Carwile, a first lieutenant who left his job as a policeman in Oxford, Mississippi, to lead a platoon here in Afghanistan. Back at home, his wife Jennifer and 2 young daughters would soon get the painful news that their lives have changed forever. But there wasn't time to grieve. On the way back to base, the flight surgeon and medics worked with grim efficiency to stabilize the wounded. Upon landing at the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses whisked the soldiers off to surgery. At the end of the day, I sat down with the platoon commander, Lieutenant Graham Inman, and talked about the stress that comes with doing this kind of work every day.
It's cumulative, and it's not like it just wears off, and everyone has, in my personal opinion, has their own threshold of what they can handle. This isn't a job that you can do and not be affected by.
One of the ways these pilots deal with that is through volunteer work with the children at the hospital next door. There, military doctors treat many local Afghans, and these kids bring joy to men who have seen too much of death.
So every time I look at those kids, I see my kids.
Without a doubt, the hardest thing is being away from the wife and kids. But all you have to do is see the Afghans and how they're struggling and how they're trying to better themselves and their families, and you realize that this is something that needs to be done.
I get a great sense of satisfaction out of what I do. I wouldn't say that I thoroughly enjoy it. There's some very unpleasant things about my job, but every day when I go to bed at the end of the night, I know I've saved lives.
And as for me, I can say that after this mission, Veterans Day has taken on a whole new meaning. Chuck Holton, CBN News, Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan.
You know, Africa is one of the most amazing, adventurous places I've ever been. And of course, anybody my age who grew up in America, probably, if you're a red-blooded American male, you grew up loving the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Indiana Jones, I wanted to be Indiana Jones. That was what if you had asked me when I was 12, 13 years old, what I wanted to do when I grow up, I would have said, I want to be Indiana Jones. And so it was a real special time when I got to go to Ethiopia and make a really interesting package about the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant, built by Moses to hold the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments at the command of God himself. In Jerusalem, it was the literal dwelling of the Most High, secreted in the darkness of the Holy of Holies for centuries. Then it disappeared. No one knows exactly where or when, but for more than 2,000 years, the whereabouts of the Ark have been shrouded in mystery, despite countless attempts to track it down. There are many theories as to the whereabouts of the holy relic. Some say it's buried under the Temple Mount. Others contend it was carried to Egypt before being lost to history. Wherever it may be, the lost Ark of the Covenant has become one of the most sought-after Christian relics in history. On a recent trip to Africa, I met up with explorer Bob Cornuke, founder of the Bible Archaeology Search and Exploration Institute. He's been investigating a little-known theory about the Ark for over 10 years and agreed to let me tag along on another fact-finding adventure. A former crime scene investigator in Los Angeles, Bob has made a name for himself by searching for biblical relics based on the same techniques he used in law enforcement. Taking the Bible as a literal guide, he's traced the route of the Jewish exodus from Egypt, searched for Noah's Ark, and probed the mystery surrounding the true location of Mount Sinai. His Ark theory goes like this. Just before the Babylonians invaded Jerusalem in 586 BC, Levitical priests moved the Ark to Egypt to save it from being destroyed. After more than a century there, it was moved again, all the way up the Nile River to Lake Tana in Ethiopia.
And this is where they say that they had the Ark, and it rested right into where those trees are. We're going to go by it here right now, and as we go by with the boat, you're going to see where they actually say the Ark sat in a tent, very similar to the tabernacle in the wilderness.
The monks living on Tanakirkos Island haven't changed their worship or way of life for thousands of years. Even today, they dress in animal skins and live a primitive existence farming the small island. They also spend more than 3 hours a day in prayer. The monks showed us relics that they say arrived with the Ark.
So these implements were said to be brought with the Ark from Solomon's temple. And this is the gomer that sits down. They put the blood in it, and then they would sprinkle the blood upon the Ark.
According to these men, their ancestors safeguarded the Ark here for 800 years. In that time, Ethiopia became a Christian nation, and after that, the king came and retrieved the ark and took it to Axum, where we're going next. The city of Axum in northern Ethiopia was once the capital of the kingdom. Ancient kings built giant obelisks to mark their graves, which rival the pyramids in engineering genius. Legend has it that the ark was brought here in about 400 AD and was placed in the church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. The only man allowed to see the ark is a monk called the Guardian, who's never allowed to leave the church enclosure.
It's like a bunker. It's made out of cinder blocks, and they tell me that as you go in that door, that there's a corridor that goes to the left. Then the corridor makes a sharp right turn, and then another sharp right turn, coming back to where what they claim is the Ark of the Covenant, sitting in a big stone sarcophagus box with a silver ornate inlaid sleeve. So people say, why doesn't someone go in and get it? It'd be pretty hard to bring it out because they actually built the building around this object that they call the Ark of the Covenant.
We arrived in Axum on the holiest day of the Ethiopian Orthodox calendar, the festival of Timkat. It's a day when tens of thousands of the faithful make a pilgrimage to Axum, and a replica of the Ark is brought out of this church and paraded through the streets of the city. The people sing and dance before the procession, and the party lasts all night long. Timkat is like Easter and Christmas all wrapped into one. This is their festival of the Epiphany, their most important holiday of the year. And these women will be out here all night long, worshiping, singing songs, and praying. There's no doubt that this is a special place and a special time. The next morning, these revelers continue celebrating with songs and dances that haven't changed in millennia. It's a fascinating look into Old Testament-style worship that can't be found anywhere else in the world. At the end of the day, there's no way to know for certain if the Ark is here or not. But one thing is for sure, there's no doubt whatsoever in the minds of these Ethiopian Christians.
Do I personally believe it? I don't know. I believe they either have the actual Ark of the Covenant mentioned in the Bible, or they have a replica that is so convincing that they've believed it to be the Ark of the Covenant for more than 2,000 years.
Chuck Holton, CBN News, Axum, Ethiopia.
And, you know, with great adventure comes great risk sometimes. And there have been some very close calls in my time doing this job. As they say, if you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later, you might get a haircut.
This rooftop I'm standing on is only about 2 kilometers from the forward line of troops. The front line's right there in Old Town Marawi behind me. We're hearing bullets go by here right now as I speak.
But, you know, I don't have to go to really remote, far-off third world countries to have close calls like that. Actually, the last time I got attacked was last week in Venezuela. But the time before that, when I got attacked, was right in downtown D.C. during the inauguration ceremonies for Donald Trump.
Crazy, folks. What are you doing? Don't film you, man. Don't film, man. Hey, what are you? Woo, getting crazy. Somebody just tried to grab my phone.
So, you know, I can't do this job forever. I know that. And so I'm just trying to enjoy every minute of it while I can and try to make the most of it. And I'm going to keep doing this job as long as God will give me strength to do it, as long as I have an outlet. And, you know, it's really been fun to be able to start transitioning what I do into not just reporting the news, but actually making the news better by allowing you, through the magic of social media, to join me on these trips and to actually reach into people's lives and make them better. We got to do that a bunch of times over the last couple of weeks. Here's one that I didn't show you yesterday as we finish out this podcast.
I was going to take a taxi back to my hotel because it's about 15 blocks, but for some reason I just felt like I ought to walk a little ways. And so now I know why. Let me show you what I found. She's a grandmother. She's 36. She's been here for a year. They're sleeping on the street.
She obviously does not eat enough. She obviously needed some food, and she's got a couple kids to take care of. So we gave her the rest of the cash that I had, which amounted to about $40, which is probably enough. Well, it's easily enough for her to eat and sleep for a month out here. Can you believe that? $40. She can live out here, have an actual place inside to sleep with a bathroom, and eat for about $40. So I think you just made somebody's day, folks. And it's time for me to go get on the airplane.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.